11. They came to a considerable outcropping of rocks when the sun said it was about 11, and here they stopped for nearly an hour, taking the shade as the sun climbed towards the roof peak of the day. Eddie and the gunslinger ate leftovers from the previous night's kill. Eddie offered a portion to Detta, who again refused, telling him she knew what they wanted to do, and if they wanted to do it, they best to do it with their bare hands and stop trying to poison her. That, she said, was the coward's way. Eddie's right, the gunslinger mused. This woman has made her own chain of memories. She knows everything that happened to her last night, even though she was really fast asleep. She believed that they had brought her pieces of meat which smelled of death and putrescence, had taunted her with it, while they themselves ate salted beef and drank some sort of beer from flasks. She believed they had, every now and then, held pieces of their own untamed supper out to her, drawing it away at the last moment when she snatched at it with her teeth, and laughing while they did it, of course. In the world, or at least in the mind, of Detta Walker, honky muffas only did two things to brown women: raped them or laughed at them, or both at the same time. It was almost funny. Eddie Dean had last seen beef during his ride in the sky carriage, and Roland had seen none since the last of his jerky was eaten. Gods alone knew how long that ago was. As far as beer, he cast his mind back. Tull. There had been beer in Tull. Beer and beef. God, it was good to have a beer. His throat ached, and it would be so good to have a beer to cool that ache. Better even than the Aston from Eddie's world. They drew off a distance from her.
"Ain't I good enough chumping for white boys like you?"
she cawed after them.
"Or did you just maybe want to have a pull on each other's one little bit white candles?"
She threw her head back and screamed laughter that frightened the gulls up, crying from the rocks where they had met in conversation a quarter of a mile away. The gunslinger sat with his hands dangling between his knees, thinking. Finally, he raised his head and told Eddie, "I can only understand about 1 word in every 10 she says." "I'm way ahead of you," Eddie replied. "I'm getting at least 2 in every 3. Doesn't matter, most of it comes back to honky muffas." Roland nodded. "Do many of the dark-skinned people talk that way where you come from?" Her other didn't. Eddie shook his head and laughed. "Nope. And I tell you something sort of funny. At least I think it's sort of funny, but maybe that's just because there isn't all that much to laugh about out here. It's not real. It's not real and she doesn't even know it." Roland looked at him and said nothing. "Remember when you washed off her forehead, how she pretended she was scared of the water?" "Yes." "You know she was pretending?" "Not at first, but quite soon." Eddie nodded. "That was an act, and she knew it was an act. But she's a pretty good actress, and she fooled both of us for a few seconds. The way she's talking is an act too, but it's not good. It's so stupid, it's goddamn hooky." "You believe she pretends well only when she knows she's doing it?" "Yes. She sounds like a cross between the darkies in the book called Mandingo I read once and Butterfly McQueen in Gone with the Wind. I know you don't know those names, but what I mean is, she talks like a cliché. Do you know that word? It means what is always said or believed by people who think only a little or not at all." "Yeah, I could not have said it half as good."
"Ain't you boys done jerking off them candles of yours yet?"
That a voice was growling hoarse and cracked.
"Or maybe it's just you can't find them, damn it."
"Come on." The gunslinger got slowly to his feet. He swayed for a moment, saw Eddie looking at him, and smiled. "I'll be all right." "For how long?" "As long as I have to be," the gunslinger answered, and the serenity in his voice chilled Eddie's heart. 12. That night, the gunslinger used his last sure life cartridge to make their kill. He would start systematically testing the ones he believed to be duds tomorrow night, but he believed it was pretty much as Eddie had said. They were down to beating the damn things to death. It was like the other nights. The fire, the cooking, the shelling, the eating. Eating which was now slow and unenthusiastic. We're just gassing up, Eddie thought. They offered food to Detta, who screamed and laughed and cursed and asked how long they was gonna take her for a fool, and then she began throwing her body wildly from one side to the other, never minding how her bonds grew steadily tighter, only trying to upset the chair to one side or the other so that they would have to pick her up again before they could eat. Just before she could manage the trick, Eddie grabbed her and Roland braced the wheels on either side with rocks. "I'll loosen the ropes a bit, if you'll be still," Roland told her.
Suck my shit out my ass, motherfucker.
"I don't understand if that means yes or no." She looked at him, eyes narrowed, suspecting some buried barb of satire in his calm voice. Eddie also wondered, but couldn't tell if there was or not. And after a moment she said sulkily, Be still. Too damn hungry to keep up much of the dickens. You boys gonna give me some real food or you just gonna starve me to death? That your plan? You two chicken shit to choke me and I got nerve gone eat poison? So that must be your plan. Starve me out. Well, we see, sure. We gon' see. Sure we are. She offered them her bone-chilling sickle of a grin again. Not long after, she fell asleep. Eddie touched the side of Roland's face. Roland glanced at him, but did not pull away from the touch. "I'm all right." "Yeah, you're Jim Dandy. Well, I'll tell you what, Jim. We didn't get along very far today." "I know." There was also the matter of having used the last live shell, but that was knowledge Eddie could do without, at least tonight. Eddie wasn't sick, but he was exhausted. Too exhausted for more bad news. No, he's not sick. Not yet. But if he goes too long without rest, gets tired enough, he'll get sick. In a way, Eddie was already. Both of them were. Cold sores had developed at the corners of Eddie's mouth, and there were scaly patches on his skin. The gunslinger could feel his teeth loosening up in their sockets, and the flesh between his toes had begun to crack open and bleed, as had that between his remaining fingers. They were eating, but they were eating the same thing day in and day out. They could go on that way for a time, but in the end they would die as surely as if they had starved. "What we have is shipmates' disease on dry land," Roland thought. "Simple as that. How funny. We need fruit. We need greens." Eddie nodded towards the lady. "She's going to go right on making it tough. Unless the other one inside her comes back. That would be nice, but we can't count on it," Eddie said. He took a piece of blackened claw and began to scrawl aimless patterns in the dirt. "Any idea how far to the next door it might be?" Roland shook his head. "I only ask because if the distance between number 2 and number 3 is the same as the distance between number 1 and number 2, we could be in deep shit." "We in deep shit right now." "Neck deep," Eddie agreed moodily. "I just keep wondering how long I can tread water." Roland clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of affection so rare it made Eddie blink. "There's one thing the lady doesn't know," he said. "Oh? What's that?" "We honky motherfuckers can tread water a long time." Eddie laughed at that, laughed hard, smothering his laughter against his arm so he wouldn't wake Detta up. He had enough of her for one day, please, and say thank you. The gunslinger looked at him, smiling. "I'm going to turn in," he said. "Be on my guard, yeah, I will." 13. Screaming was next. Eddie fell asleep the moment his head touched the bunched bundle of his shirt, and it seemed only 5 minutes later when Detta began screaming. He was awake at once, ready for anything. Some king lobster arisen from the deep to take revenge for its slain children, and a horror down from the hills. It seemed he was awake at once anyway, but the gunslinger was already on his feet, a gun in his left hand. When he saw they were both awake, Detta promptly quit screaming.
"Just thought I'd see if you boys on your toes," she said. "Might be wolves. Looks like enough country for 'em. Wanted to make sure if I saw me a wolf creeping up, I could get you on your feet in time."
But there was no fear in her eyes. They glinted with mean amusement. "Christ," Eddie said groggily. The moon was up but barely risen. They had been asleep less than an hour or two. The gunslinger holstered his gun. "Don't do it again," he said to the lady in the wheelchair.
"What you gonna do if I do? Rape me?"
"If we were going to rape you, you would be one well-raped woman by now," the gunslinger said evenly. "Don't do it again." He lay down, pulling his blanket over him. "Christ, dear Christ," Eddie thought. "What a mess this is, what a fucking..." And that was a fear, as the thought went before trailing off into an exhausted sleep again. And then she was splittering the air with fresh shrieks, shrieking like a fireball, and Eddie was up again, his body flaming with adrenaline, hands clenched. And then she was laughing, her voice hoarse and raspy. Eddie glanced up and saw the moon had advanced less than 10 degrees since they had awakened them the first time. "She means to keep on doing it," he thought warily. "She means to stay awake and watch us, and when she's sure we're getting down into deep, deep sleep, that place when you recharge, she's going to open her mouth and start bellowing again. She'll do it and do it and do it until she doesn't have any voice left to bellow with." Her laughter stopped abruptly. Roland was advancing on her, a dark shape in the moonlight.
"You just stay away from me, Grey Meat,"
Detta said, but there was a quiver of nerves in her voice.
"You ain't gonna do nothing to me."
Roland stood before her, and for a moment Eddie was sure, completely sure, that the gunslinger had reached the end of his patience and would simply swat her like a fly. Instead, astoundingly, he dropped to one knee before her, like a suitor about to propose marriage. "Listen," he said, and Eddie could scarcely credit the silky quality of Roland's voice. He could see much the same deep surprise on Detta's face, only there was fear joined with it. "Listen to me, Odetta."
"Why you be calling me Odetta? That ain't my name."
"Shut up, bitch," the gunslinger said in a growl, and then reverted to the same silken voice. "If you hear me, and if you can control her at all..."
"Why you talking to me that way? Why you talking like you talking to somebody else? You quit that honky jive. Yes, you quit it now, you hear me?"
"Keep her shut up. I can gag her, but I don't want to do that. A hard gag is dangerous business. People choke."
"You quit it, you honky bullshit voodoo mafia!"
"Odetta." His voice was a whisper, like the onset of rain. She felt silent, staring at him with huge eyes. Eddie had never in his life seen such a hate and fear combined into human eyes. "I don't think this bitch would care if she did die on a hard gag. She wants to die, but maybe even more she wants you to die. But you haven't died, not so far, and I don't think Detta is brand new in your life. She feels too at home in you, so maybe you can hear what I'm saying and maybe you can keep some control over her, even if you can't come out yet. Don't let her wake us a third time, Odetta. I don't want to gag her, but if I have to, I will." He got up, left without looking back, rolled himself into his blanket again, and promptly fell asleep. She was still staring at him, eyes wide, nostrils flaring.
"Honky voodoo bullshit,"
she whispered. Eddie lay down, but this time it was a long time before sleep came to claim him, in spite of his deep tiredness. He would come to think, anticipate her screams, and snap back. 3 hours or so later, with the moon now going on the other way, he finally dropped off. Detta did not make more screaming that night, either because Roland had frightened her, or because she wanted to conserve her voice for future alarmus or executions, or probably just possibly because Odetta had heard and had exercised the control the gunslinger had asked of her. Eddie slept at last, but awoke sodden and unfreshed. He looked towards the chair, hoping against hope that it would be Odetta. Please God, let it be Odetta this morning.
"Morning, Whitebeard,"
Detta said, and grinned her shark-like grin at him.
"Thought you was gonna sleep till noon. You can't be doing nothing like that, can you? We got to bust up some wires here, ain't that fussing matter? Sure, and I think you the one gonna give the most of the pushing, because that other fella, one with the voodoo eyes, he looking more peaky all the time. I declare he do, yeah. I don't think he gonna be eating anything much longer. Not even that fancy smoked meat you white bread boys keep for when you be jicking on each other's one little bitty white candles. So let's go, white bread. That I don't want to be done keeping you.
Her lids and her voice both dropped a little. Her eyes peeked at him slyly from their corners.
Not from starting out less ways. This gon' be day, member white bread.
Those sly eyes promised.
This gon' be the day remember for long, long time. Sure.
14. They made 3 miles that day. Maybe a shade under. Data's chair upset twice. Once she did it herself, working her chairs unobtrusively over to that handle brake again and yanking it. The second time, Eddie did it with no help at all, shoving it too hard in one of those goddamn sand traps. That was near the end of the day, and he simply panicked, thinking he just wasn't going to be able to get her out this time, just wasn't. So he gave that one last titanic heave with his quivering arms, and of course it had been much too hard, and over she had gone, like Humpty Dumpty falling off his wall, and he and Roland had to labor to get her upright again. They finished the job just in time. The rope under her breast was now pulled taut across her windpipe. The gunslinger's efficient running slipknot was choking her to death. Her face had gone a funny blue color. She was on the verge of losing consciousness, but still she went on wheezing her nasty laughter. "Let her be, why don't you?" Eddie nearly said as Roland bent quickly forward to loosen the knot. "Let her choke. I don't know if she wants to do it herself like you said, but I know she wants to do us. So let her go." Then he remembered Odetta, although their encounter had been so brief and seemed so long ago that memory was growing dim, and moved forward to help. The gunslinger pushed him impatiently away with one hand. "Only room for one." When the rope was loosened and the lady gasping harshly for breath, which she expelled into a gust of her angry laughter, he turned and looked at Eddie critically. "I thought we had to stop for the night." "A little further," he was almost pleading. "I can go on a little further."
"Sure, he be one strong buck. He be good for chopping one more raw cotton, and he still have enough left to give you a little bit white candle one fine sucking on tonight."
She still wouldn't eat, and her face was becoming all stark in lines and angles. Her eyes glittered in deepening sockets. Roland gave her no notice at all, only studied Eddie closely. At last he nodded. "A little way. Not far, but a little way." 20 minutes later, Eddie called it quits himself. His arms felt like jello. They sat in the shadows of the rocks, listening to the gulls, watching the tide come in, waiting for the sun to go down and the lobstrosities to come out, and begin their cumbersome cross-examinations. Roland told Eddie in a voice too low for Detta to hear that he thought they were out of live shells. Eddie's mouth tightened down a little, but that was all. Roland was pleased. "So you'll have to brain one of them yourself," Roland said. "I'm too weak to handle a rock big enough to do the job, and still be sure." Eddie was now the one to do the studying. He had no liking for what he saw. The gunslinger waved his scrutiny away. "Never mind," he said. "Never mind, Eddie. What is, is." "Ka," Eddie said. The gunslinger nodded and smiled faintly. "Ka." "Kaka," Eddie said, and they looked at each other and both laughed. Roland looked startled, and perhaps even a little afraid of the rusty sound emerging from his mouth. His laughter did not last long. When it had stopped, he looked distant and melancholy.
"That laughing mean you finally managed to joke each other off?"
Detta cried over at them in her hoarse, failing voice.
"When you gonna get down to the poking? That's what I wanna see, that poking."
15. Eddie made the kill. Detta refused to eat as before. Eddie ate half a piece so she could see, then offered her the other half.
"No, sir," she said, eyes sparkling at him. "No, sir. You don't put the poison in the other end. One you trying to give me."
Without saying anything, Eddie took the rest of the piece, put it in his mouth, chewed and swallowed.
"Don't mean a thing,"
Detta said softly.
Leave me alone, grey meat.
Eddie wouldn't. He brought her another piece. You tear it in half. Give me whichever you want. I'll eat it, then you eat the rest.
I ain't falling for none of your honky tricks, Miss Childe. Get away from me is what I said, and get away from me is what I want.
16. She did not scream that night, but she was still there the next morning. 17. That day, they made only 2 miles, although Detta made no effort to upset her chair. Eddie thought she might be growing too weak for acts of attempted sabotage, or perhaps she had seen there was really no need for them. 3 fatal factors were drawing inexorably together. Eddie's weariness, the terrain, which after endless days of sameness were finally beginning to change, and Roland's deteriorating condition. There were less sand traps, but that was cold comfort. The ground was becoming grainier, more and more like cheap and unprofitable soil, and less like sand. In places, bunches of weeds grew, looking almost ashamed to be there. And there were so many large rocks now jutting from this old combination of sand and soil that Eddie found himself detouring around them as he had previously tried to detour the lady's chair around the sand traps. And soon enough he saw there would be no beach left at all. The hills, brown and cheerless things, were drawing steadily closer. Eddie could see the ravenous which curled between them, looking like chops made by an awkward giant wielding a blunt cleaver. That night, before falling asleep, he heard what sounded like a very large cat squalling far up in one of them. The beach had seemed endless, but he was coming to realize it had an end after all. Somewhere up ahead, those hills were simply going to squeeze it out of existence. The eroded hills would march down the sea and then into it, where they might become first a cape or a peninsula of sort, and then a series of archipelagos. That worried him, but Roland's condition worried him more. This time the gunslinger seemed not so much to be burning as if fading, losing himself, becoming transparent. The red lines had appeared again, marching relentlessly up the underside of his right arm towards the elbow. For the last 2 days Eddie had looked constantly ahead, squinting into the distance, hoping to see the magic door. For the last 2 days he had waited for Detta to reappear. Neither had happened. Before falling asleep that night, 2 terrible thoughts came to him, like some joke with a double punchline. What if there was no door? What if Odetta Holmes was dead? 18.
Rise and shine, Martha,
Detta screeched at him out of unconsciousness.
I think it just be you and me now, honey child. Think your friend done finally passed on. I think your friend be poking the devil down in hell.
Eddie looked at the rolled, huddled shape of Roland, and for one terrible moment he thought the bitch was right. Then the gunslinger stirred, moaned furrily, and pawed himself into the sitting position.
Well, looky there!
Detta screamed so much that now there were moments when her voice disappeared almost entirely, becoming no more than a weird whisper, like a winter wind under a door.
I thought you was dead, Mr. Man.
Roland was getting slowly to his feet. He still looked to Eddie like a man using the rungs of an invisible ladder to make it. Eddie felt an angry sort of pity, and this was a familiar emotion, oddly nostalgic. After a moment he understood. It was like when he and Henry used to watch the fights on TV, and one fighter would hurt the other, hurt him terribly again and again, and the crowd would be screaming for blood, and Henry would be screaming for blood, but Eddie only sat there, feeling that angry pity, that dumb disgust. He sat there, sending thought waves as the referee, "Stop it, man, are you fucking blind? He's dying out there, dying, stop the fucking fight." There was no way to stop this one. Roland looked at her from his haunted, feverish eyes. A lot of people have thought that. He looked at Eddie. You ready? Yeah, I guess so. Are you? Yes. Can you? Yes. They went on. Around 10 o'clock, Detta began rubbing her temples and her fingers. Stop, she said. I feel sick. I feel I'm gonna throw up. Probably that big meal you ate last night, Eddie said, and went on pushing. You should have skipped dessert. I told you that chocolate layer cake was heavy.
I gon' throw up,
"Stop, Eddie," the gunslinger said. Eddie stopped. The woman in the chair suddenly twisted galvanically as an electric shock had run through her. Her eyes popped open wide, glaring at nothing.
"I broke your plate, you stinking old blue lady!" she screamed. "I broke it and I'm fucking glad I did."
She suddenly slumped forward in her chair. If not for the ropes, she would have fallen out of it. Christ, she's dead. She's had a stroke and she's dead, Eddie thought. He stared around the chair, remembered how sly and tricksy she could be, and stopped as suddenly as he had started. He looked at Roland. Roland looked back at him evenly, his eyes giving away not a thing. Then she moaned. Her eyes opened. Her eyes. Odetta's eyes. "Dear God, I've fainted again, haven't I?" she said. "I'm sorry. You had to tie me in. My stupid legs. I think I could sit up a little if you—" That was when Roland's old legs suddenly came unhinged, and he swooned some 30 miles south of the place where the Western Sea beach came to an end. Thank you guys for sitting down with another part of Majin reading Dying of the Three. And my God, was that a good note to end on. Finally, Odetta Holmes has made her way back to Roland and Eddie, and apparently she remembers nothing. In fact, she just believes that she fainted and needed to be tied to the chair so that progress should be made. We'll see if Eddie and Roland will confront her about Detta's existence. But that will have to wait until next time. Long days and pleasant nights, listener.